Toss it in the mailbox. You can actually mail plastic bottles. You can even mail a coconut.
It's true.
Giving this plastic a loving new home that isn't landfills or oceans. The sea life and planet will be so happy. And you'll be happy too. Loving homes for plastic. Making the world a happier place. From Liquid Death.
So this is an amazing commercial. I love it. Very clearly unconventional, a little edgy. Tell us a little bit about that and how it represents Liquid Death's brand.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was about the idea of, just the idea of that certainly said for us and the brand being about, like Liquid Death being about death to plastic, and sort of like, how do we, this is sort of Mike Cesare, who's our CEO, sort of, genius thinking. And it was like, we know it's cheaper for them to just make new bottles. So the idea of actually sending them back, and getting people to sort of think about it from that perspective, which was just funny. I would say this is probably as close to like a discussion around another company that we've ever had. Like typically the way we really approach things is like just making fun of ourselves and making fun of marketing and that kind of the thing. So this was a little bit almost edgier for us because there was sort of a sense of like, there was big blue corp and big red corp, which is not normally kind of what we do. Right. But I think for the idea of driving home the point of like, hey, the sort of concept of recycling has been something that's been put on us as people, and that actually the reality is most of it is like plastic doesn't get recycled. It's not cost effective. It's makes more sense to make more plastic bottles. So it's going to take like a real movement and a real people being like, I don't want this anymore, to actually be able to change that. So that's what that was all about.
Yeah, and I watched that, right before this, and there's something to be said just about the shock factor and just how refreshing the whole marketing around Liquid Death is. Even the quote, murder your thirst, right? It's just something like, it grabs your attention. And I love how it's just so different from, kind of typically where water, like bottled water has played. I think, as we look at a commercial like that, and, for the audience, Amy has an incredibly impressive background in major companies like AT&T and Uber, these big companies we all know. I'd love to kind of hear how you shifted from leading business at, major companies like AT&T and Uber, and how you ended up, moving over to kind of that fresh, kind of edgy company, Liquid Death.
Yeah. For me, it's always been about the build. Like that's the part that's really fun and exciting. And so whether it was early startup and then even AT&T where we were building Uverse, and so and then I was building out their broadband stuff, large company, right? Which made it able to move and to sort of build things in a quick manner and be able to trial and error and get things up and going in a non-corporate sort of way. And then even with Uber, when I started in middle of 14, I think we were in maybe 70 cities and had about 900 people. And when I left 5 years later, we were in over 700 and about 27,000 people. So kind of still like same super early. And some of it is the same thing where, even at Uber, I remember starting and looking, we had like a 5% awareness on the brand. That was it. In the US, nothing outside, 5%. Within
Quite
a year,
different now.
crazy, right? Yeah. And within a year, it was 95%. So it was sort of the difference of going from, oh, this thing that, was really cool, to like, oh my God, everyone knowing what it was. And so, coming to Liquid Death, I think originally I was like, oh, this brand is really cool. It took me like the cycle a little bit of, which happens with most people. They go, Liquid Death. Wait, what is that? Like,
yeah.
I'm like, I said, you were like, I'm like sunshine and rainbows. Like that's not, a brand for me. And then you realize it's just funny. And that's the whole point of it. And so, even in careers after I left Uber, I just took time off, and I knew I would take at least a year, if not more off. And I ended up taking close to 2. And that it was like, I don't know, I looked at everything for like problem, people, and potential. Like, what's a problem I'm going to solve? What am I getting up to do every day? And am I excited about doing those things? Who are the people? Am I going to like working with these people and spending all this time together? And then what's the potential? Like, I really like scale and growth and the ability to do that stuff. And so looking at those three things and then spending time with with Mike, the CEO of Liquid Death, and the entire team, who are just awesome, great, fun, cool people. It was like, yeah, I'm totally in. So, and taking something that's smaller and being able to then do the things you know how to do to be able to put scale on it is part of what's really fun and what drew me to the company.
I love that. And what would you say is the major difference you've experienced between, working at some of these larger companies to now, working at Liquid Death? What's some of the major differences? And also, what are some of the things you brought from your experiences at AT&T and Uber?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest difference, which happens, I think, at any company, and I would say Uber was not like this at the beginning, but then maybe became more so, is like the idea of like this well-worn path of, well, this is how we do it. And like people get into that rut. And even when we work with other partners where it's like, oh, no, well, this is the way we do those things. It's like, well, why do you do those things that way? Like, wouldn't it be better potentially to not do it that way? Or let's test it out, right? And really understand what works and what doesn't. So I think, like the ability to do that. And to me, the single biggest factor, which I know that I'm bringing to Liquid Death, is speed and execution. Like, I remember people would always be like, Uber, I should have had that idea or whatever. And it's like, no, you should have been able to execute. And like, I've never worked with a team who we could decide what we're going to do and move, and like everyone row in the same direction and do it quickly. And so I think that when you're trying to win, particularly as an upstart or someone who's not the big corporation, like your ability to move with speed, to test what works, throw gas on the fire of what's working. If it's not working, to be able to quickly change and go, okay, cool, great. I'm going to learn from that and figure out what didn't work on that and then move on to the next thing. So it's definitely bringing those lessons, here to Liquid Death for sure.
Awesome. I love that. And I think, as you think about just that innovation piece, obviously speaking at brand innovators, what does brand innovation mean to you as a chief business officer? And how are you really like making sure that's happening every day?
Yeah. It really becomes about the channels, like from an innovation perspective. The good news, at least as I look at, this brand, right, about Liquid Death, like innovation is in the DNA, like the idea that we're going to do something that's weird and not been done before. And Mike always says there's sort of this like 5 degrees one way and it's kind of lame, and then like 5 degrees the other way and it's too much. So finding that sweet spot where it's kind of, it makes people stop and think. But it's, it's not what they've normally seen. It's not what your brain is trained to do. And so it's not that worn down groove. And then how do we apply that across all the different avenues of the business of what we do? So that continues to happen in the marketing, right? And doing things in a way that is non-traditional. That's not just, even when you were talking about like the Loving Homes for Plastic, like you talked about as a commercial, well, we didn't do it as a commercial. Like we did it as an actual product. So you on the site could buy the stickers and send them to put on the plastic bottles and be able to send them back. So it's like that idea of taking the concept and the idea and following all the way through with it. So it's not just, oh, wow, that's really weird and funny. It's like, no, then they made that product,
Right.
And it seems to have much more impact when it becomes something that's actually real and tangible. So for me, it's like, in every different way, how are we thinking about approaching in something new? And then, we're in a CPG business. So for us, retail distribution, we started as a direct to consumer business. We've then gone heavily into retail, and kind of a lot of the game is really at retail. And then what are other avenues and channels where we can continue to sell where we can, sell the product. And then also from an awareness perspective, because we're in that, like, most people just don't know who we are, and they certainly don't know we're water if we've seen it. So how do we really how do we focus on different channels for increasing awareness and then for education as well?
Definitely. Yeah, that's a really good segue. And I know, some of you guys may know that Liquid Death was actually voted one of the 50 most inspiring companies. You guys obviously have such a fun marketing kind of vision, especially I love, like in our conversation before, one of the things you mentioned is, why is it only the companies that are bad for you that get to have fun? So I love like to have you bring us in a little bit to what the internal discussions look like and the marketing team, and how you guys are like staying so like edgy and fun when it comes to what you guys are coming out with from a brand marketing and awareness standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back from a philosophical perspective of the idea that like, as marketers, you can get tied up in like, oh my God, you've created this great thing, and then you execute on it and you're like so psyched. And if you did it really, really well, you might get someone's attention for like 30 seconds and they go, oh, that was cool. And then they move on to like the rest of their, their day and their life. And so with Liquid Death being created, so much of it was about like taking the healthiest thing possible, which is water, and actually making it fun, like energy drinks and soda and candy, which were the only things that market in that way of like, this is actually fun. So we sort of, as we look at stuff, it's like, it gives people permission to like, to be cool and have a good time. And, we see, tons of like kids that are like, parents are buying water for their kids because they're like holding a tall boy and it feels like a beer and it feels really good. Water,
Yeah.
So when we think about it, we think about what's fun, what makes fun of ourselves, right? And the idea of marketing, and like, how do we bring things to life that people go, oh my God, I really can't believe they just did that. And that ends up having way more impact and value for us. A recent one we just did, which we just launched the premiere and then we'll go to out. We actually made a horror movie.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty epic. I love it.
Right. And I almost showed that trailer, but I was like, oh, let's do different. But everyone take a look at it. It's called Dead Till Death. And, basic concept is your classic, kids go camping in the woods. They stop at the store to get cases of liquid death. And then the cans come out to, they have their own reasons for coming alive and for, like wanting to rid plastic and, get rid of pollution. And it's just really funny. So it's like, we actually created a movie, and sort of thinking was like, we could spend the same amount of money on a 30-second spot, or we could make a movie, and then kind of create all of the things that go around that movie and posters and t-shirts and like, and the experience around the entertainment.
Right.
And that, like, the value of that is so much higher. And it's even from an ROI perspective, we haven't even launched, and it's proved out to be like a very successful way of marketing for us. By actually, we think about marketing as entertainment, right?
Yeah.
And like, what are people, and we talked about this a little, like, we're very like, one of our core values is that, people are not consumers, they're people, right? And they're smarter and they deserve your attention, and they're not the sum of the things they buy, right? Like, it's just not, that's, we want to talk to people, not to consumers. And we want to make things that are interesting and entertaining for people, that then in turn, they have the love, kind of, we feel the love and the love for the brand.
It's great because I know you mentioned that to me, and I think it's such a nuanced thing to say, but we get so like into the, I guess, like norm or routine of talking about the consumer journey and kind of like not remembering at the end of the day, like, we're people, we're at the end of the day want someone who's going to excite us and speak to our values and needs, right? And one of the interesting things, we talked about too, is Liquid Death has historically had such like a passionate audience, but it has been like, there's very niche communities that you guys speak to, right? There's the music scene where I know it's been like EDM and punk, and you guys have a really like significant hold there. And also, things like environmentalists, right? Moving away from plastic. How do you, one, identify these audiences and figure out what kind of messaging and creative or entertainment or partnerships for that matter speak to them, while also shifting to move to more of a mass awareness, right? Not so niche, but also just known in the mass kind of, public market.
Yeah, the whole thing is like, how do you still appeal to your core demo without, but get bigger without, as we say, like losing your soul, right? And sort of the soul of what Liquid Death is. And so, yeah, for sure. Like, we started out like with roots in like punk and metal, because it's Liquid Death and it just sort of fits with, everything in that way. And then it's been actually, I think, probably one of the smartest things that the company had done, and I can't take credit for it at all, but has from the beginning, created a lifestyle marketing team with this guy named Styx, who worked for Past Blue Ribbon and a bunch of brands, and he's just the greatest. And the idea was really to have people that were endemic to the audience who are helping and working with us. So, a woman, Jen, is the lead singer of the Bomb Pops, the band. Blasco was a guitarist for for Rob Zombie and for, like all of these different amazing bands. We have, a professional snowboarder, professional skateboarder, like people who are endemic and like authentic to their actual, these are their friends. And so they're able to take a product in to those groups in a very like real way of being like, I love this, check this out. And then that's sort of how that love has grown. And so we're looking to really expand. So we've kind of started that way, done cool things in the areas that are like core to us. And then it becomes about taking that same value and the same sort of irreverent, and expanding it. And I think that's through the fact that it's fun. Like, I don't know. I think about this a lot, like from an impact perspective that the company can have. And it's like, if drinking water and making it fun and having it in this, our brand and the kind of cool factor and like, great, like I'm at a club, I'm at a show, I'm at a party, and having that vibe is the thing that gets people to get rid of single-use plastic. Like, yay team, right? Like we've done the job. And I think it really comes down to that. People tend to make emotional decisions and like, and then want a justification for them. So it's sort of like, this is fun and really cool and it tastes good. You have to obviously have a good product, right? For people to have that has to kind of, that goes without saying, I guess that's a table stakes. And then how do you make that? It's, it's for us, it's about how do you make it really fun and entertaining? And then that's the behavior and they feel good because, and I'm also doing something that's better for the environment. It's a much easier path than I should be doing this. I should be drinking this. This is what's right for, for my health, for the environment, or for whatever it is. Flipping it and being like, oh, this is fun. Oh, and it's good too. Great. And that's kind of how we think about everything.
A 2-for-1. I love that. Yeah. And I know you guys have some like really exciting new partnerships, like major congratulations for Live Nation. I'm curious, as we're talking about your guys' audience, what is kind of the internal process on how you're analyzing the data of your audience, like what conversations are important to them, and then using that to put partnerships together like Live Nation?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, like for us right now, I mean, some of it is, it's certainly starting to understand what our demographics are like, and it's interesting. We actually don't know as much, I don't honestly yet, as we're going to, and as we need to, right? Because we are in that place where it has become, we've moved definitely out of like niche, but moving into mass where, we're at Whole Foods and 7-Eleven and Sprouts and Publix and started in Targets and Walmart's, like that sort of large distribution and becoming mass has started. So when we think about the sort of who our demo is, like, even as we're thinking about new channels, it's sort of like, we know we do skew male for sure. But we also are digging into our Whole Foods information to be like, well, who's the Whole Foods shopper, right? And is that someone, is she buying, is it a woman that's buying it for herself? Is it a mom that's buying it for her kids? Is it a guy who's buying it for, themselves or others, et cetera? So we've looked at it almost more like in a psychographic way, I would say at this point, where it's like, cool, where are people having a good time, right? And, when the pandemic happened, we had all of this movement into on-premise that didn't happen because no one was going anywhere. And now as the world has come back, we've had a very heavy focus on cool, like people are out and they're enjoying themselves. They're at festivals, they're at shows, they're at, parties. Like, we want to be the water and we want to be the thing that's like the best thing for you at that party. But that you actually have a really good time, and enjoy.
I love that. Well, that's a good segue into kind of the influencer and ambassador world, partnerships from major, companies to people, right? And I know, you guys are working with awesome people like Tony Hawk, Steve-O, Machine Gun Kelly, Chainsmokers. We actually do have a couple of questions from the audience that comes into play here. So how important is influencers in your marketing strategy and messaging, and how are you identifying people who are the right fit?
Yeah, so it's super important. I mean, it's really been one that I even think the change happens so quickly, right? And sort of where people look to sort of their information. And so influencer for us is really important. And in fact, most of what we show, even from our own social channels, is other people, right? It's people who are fans of the brand, who are doing things with it. We're starting a contest actually today called Crack Open a Water, where it's like, what's the dumbest way you could open a can of Liquid Death? And then the top winner will get tickets till death. So it's $1,000 from Live Nation for the next 30 years. And amazing, right? And fun. And we have our influencers actually on this, like Steve-O and Lex and Snacks from TikTok, Cody Co are all like going to be judges for us. And so influencers super important. The question of how you find the right ones, it really becomes for us, it's like, what's the brand fit? So are they inspired by it? Are they excited by it? And do they have a sense of humor? Because for us, it's about getting the joke, so it's like, where some things people might think were like super on brand, like, like fighting, and it's like, well, not really. Like, yes, great if everyone wants to drink it, but I way more like the troop of ballerinas who are drinking Liquid Death. Right? Like a lot of our best
factor.
Totally. Yeah. The best content we've had have been like, and even from a social perspective, like Milo the cat, like there's this cat and like drinks water and
influencers.
Yep, exactly. Totally. Right. I mean, it's really funny, but those are the kinds of things. Or Baba, this grandmother who they gave her, Liquid Death thing. And so kind of, it's the juxtaposition of things that you wouldn't think are straight on the nose, and that also then are funny and inspiring. Like that's the kind of thing that we certainly look for.
Yeah, I love that. We have another question here, essentially just asking how you guys balance macro influencers. Obviously, like, some of these major musicians or athletes are huge, right, and well known, compared to some of the micro influencers, right? And how do you identify what role they play and how they resonate with your audience?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of trial by error in a way. I mean, at all levels, there are people who really love the brand, right?
Yeah.
And so for some of our bigger influencers, Machine Gun Kelly and Wiz Khalifa and Tony Hawk, and like, they love it and they're literally invested in it and are ambassadors, and like, they're excited to be a part of it in that way. And so, I kind of look at it in the same way as we look at everything from a marketing and sort of sense of a pyramid. Like, there's certain high impact, high value, we're going to spend more money, we're going to do certain things with a few that we think will have a large impact.
Yep.
And then we spend a lot more kind of at the sort of bottom side of the pyramid, where it's like, who knew that Milo the cat would do so well, or there's a woman on TikTok named VFlow who just does these like things from convenience stores. She works in a convenience store and like kind of creates these jokes. And so she loved it. And sort of, we did a little tiny thing with her and that did extremely well.
Yeah.
So I think from our perspective, or certainly from mine, it's about, because you don't know, because it's art and science, right? You just really don't know what's going to resonate and spark with people. So I'd rather spend more time in the sort of micro area, right?
Yep.
Figuring out what does work and trying, and then being able to like, try to put, effort behind those things versus spending all our time on a big thing and having it not. That said, we do spend equal time where we're going to be coming out with some of our videos with some of our influencers that are really funny, like the concepts are great. And so we think those also will resonate, because regardless of like the size of the influencer, it has to be about funny and about resonating with the brand. Like, I think that's when people get into trouble, when they try to use somebody who's bigger and they have this mass following, but it's not really, it doesn't mean anything to their product. Or what they're trying to sell. So like, I think it works for us as long as we're really true to that core of like, this person loves it, they get the joke, and we can do something that's funny, then that's what works.
Yeah, I love that. And for you guys, especially, I mean, with a brand that is so authentic, it's great to kind of find people who represent the brand, but let them have fun with it, right? And have kind of like, have their own voice when talking about the brand messaging. And in that vein, I think something that's also interesting is like, how do you guys manage still having the core brand messaging and values while also letting people like run with it and create something that's really kind of unique to them?
Yeah. I mean, you just got to go, okay. You know what I mean? Like, sort of like let it go. I mean, but that's been some of the most successful stuff that we've done is, right? It's like, people, particularly when you're talking about influence and all that, they have their audience, right? They
Yep.
have the things that they're known for, that they're core to. Like we did a video with Mark Rabelais, who he was like really nervous. For any of those who know who he is, he's, you know, like I'd say he's half musician, half performer, you know, content creator, and he's just super funny, creates he's amazing musician. And so he created this whole Liquid Death, you know, song, and he was really nervous about it. Like I know he was put up like, this is an ad, like it just wasn't something he normally did. And his audience loved it. Like they
Yeah.
thought it was hilarious because it was what he did. And then getting the essence of the brand of what's a kind of are the irreverency and the like, we're not for everyone, we're kind of for the underdog, like it's a different kind of a vibe, and putting those two things together, then that tends to work really well. So that's been what's worked well for us.
I love it. I have to tell you, the amount of questions that are coming in are pretty impressive. So we've got a lot of them. We have another one coming in. Yeah. So I think, you know, you guys obviously have such a great impact on these different partnerships and channels. How are you guys tracking the impact of your different channels, such as what you've done on Spotify and on podcasts? And kind of walk us through what that has looked like.
Yeah. So, I mean, for us, like kind of, there's a few metrics, right, for us that we're tracking and that we're sort of, you know, that are important. Sales, clearly, right? Like how are we selling? You know, that's going to be kind of a number one thing, and we're getting us to a certain place. And awareness is another one. As we said, we're still in, you know, depending on what study you look at, 13%, like still from a Gen Pop perspective, like pretty low awareness. And then social, like, and we kind of look at that as its own separate bucket. And so it's been interesting. Like we've seen, you know, we came in very heavy from a podcast perspective for us. And Greg Fast, who's great, who runs our VP marketing, is awesome and kind of had very great success with it. So we leaned into comedy, and we are very much leaning into comedy. So people like Bert Kreischer and I don't know, Jason Ellis, and like all of these different podcasters. And it was interesting because we actually could see like our Whole Foods volume and our podcast strategy kind of aligning in a curve. So, you know, the ability to try to understand and track, and obviously what's working, which ones are working, which ones are not. You know, from a social perspective, for us hit like a major milestone where we became the biggest water brand on Instagram. And the other two, I think, that had been close had, you know, Will and Jaden Smith and The Rock, right? Which we have not done, you know? So for us, we've spent a ton of time on Instagram and TikTok. Those have become kind of the two core platforms that we use from a growth perspective. We'll get into Snapchat and into all the others. But those have been kind of our main ones. And being able to kind of track the growth of the follows and, you know, kind of what people, you know, enjoying the content from a brand perspective. So, you know, and then we will, you know, this year obviously becomes all about, from my perspective, all about awareness, right? And sort of how do people know what it is? And then also it's education. Like, you know, when we started out, we did some stuff with Spartan Race. And so like we had the water at the end of the race, and most people just ran right past. And then we kind of put out like, don't be scared, it's just water. And then like, wait, this is water? So that every party, every event is the same. The beginning, people don't know what it is. Then they look at it and they're like, this is really funny, and it's just water. And then by the end of the night, everything is gone. So it's like people have kind of that curve. So we're trying to shorten that curve, right? And get the awareness up and get the education up. So people are in the joke and they know that it's water. And then we'll track and measure that, both based on sales, awareness, and then how we do on social.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know you're relatively new to the company. As you look back, is there one or a couple campaigns that you've worked on that has been your favorite?
I mean, so far, it's all been fun. I mean, I think like, you know, the ones of like walking the edge where you're like, do I love this or am I totally grossed out by this? You know, then we did, and I helped on the back end, like this thing called Cutie Palooties, which was this like 90s-ish, you know, commercial for like stuffed animals, but they're all stuffed animals that have been mutilated by single-use plastic. So again, like we made this, and then we actually have been making the stuffed animals, and they're on the way, and hopefully we'll be able to, you know, like get them out soon. So it's kind of the combination, right, of having something that's, you know, the content side of it, and then something that's tangible. or the No Brainer we just did in conjunction with, we did it with Netflix when they put out Army of the Dead, which is Zack Snyder's most recent movie, where it was like zombie apocalypse is coming to Vegas and it's kind of a heist movie, but zombies have infiltrated. We did a 30-minute infomercial that we ran at 2:00 in the morning in Vegas, like of the No Brainer, which was the neoprene head thing that you could put 4 cans of liquid death in.
Hydration station, guys.
Like full on everything you'd expect from that.
Saving the world one Vegas hangover at a time.
Exactly. It went wrong. So like, that's, I think a lot of the fun of it, of stuff that we've done, that like, it's like, you have this idea, you're creating it, it's super fun. And the content is great. And then there's actually weirdly something tangible that goes along with it too. That's been really fun to work on.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like, you get kind of the best of both worlds of marketing something that's so much fun, but really feeling like the validation of knowing it's doing something good in the world, right? I mean, eliminating plastic is huge, obviously, in so many different ways. I think as you look ahead to the future, what are some of your predictions on the future of bottled water and where Liquid Death kind of plays a role in that and kind of igniting that change?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, I mean, the category continues to grow. I mean, good and bad, that maybe tap water is, some places it's okay, others it's not, I mean, you hope that we kind of solve the general problem, making sure, right, that everyone has enough water. And then from the plastic side, we're really seeing a sea change. And I feel good that I feel like we're starting it. Like we, did this deal with Live Nation, where we'll be the exclusive still and sparkling water for them in over 100 venues and over 20 of their major festivals every year. And like really putting a stake in the ground to say, okay, we are getting rid of single-use plastic. So we're starting to see that. And kind of my, like, I think we're going to, I think that we will speed up that change, where you've seen people kind of give lip service to it, like, yeah, we need to do that. But now there are actually viable options where people can do that. And people, not consumers, are willing, they want that, right? Like people don't want, to have, I walk into a convenience store and like, let's say it's not a 7-Eleven and you're on the road and I'm like, there's a sea of plastic bottles. And it's like, I don't want to buy this. So my sense is, the market will continue to grow. It's continued to grow. It's like $21 billion in the US, I think, just the bottled water market, which is kind of nuts. And you see more flavors and you see more innovation in it. And so I think that's going to continue to grow. And then I also think the push away from single-use plastic, at some point, the big companies are going to have to make the switch. Like right now, it's all about telling you how good this plastic bottle is and how really it's not bad for the environment. And it's kind of, most of it's bullshit, as I found out. So, but it's not like, but for us as a brand, it's not like, the only thing we are is about death to plastic, right? Like it has to be more, because there can be a lot, my goal and hope is that then everybody starts putting their water into aluminum, into things that are recyclable. Right. So then it has to be like, people want to drink Liquid Death because of the brand, because we entertain you, because it's fun to drink and it's social. And so that's, that's sort of how I'm thinking about it. And I said, I think the category is just going to continue to grow. Yeah. And I'm hopeful that we will help speed the demise of the single-use water bottle.
Absolutely. And, you guys have really like made yourself into more than just a brand, but really, a lifestyle, which I think is awesome. And it's entertaining and saving a lot of the world while you're doing it. And I think as you think about the future of the water industry and people that we're marketing to, how are you guys viewing the new, what everyone's talking about, Gen Z, the young generation, and how are you guys kind of planning to reach them?
We are reaching them. I mean, I think that's a core part of our audience. I mean, like, TikTok, number one, right? Yeah. I mean, and like everyone, in that generation is pretty much on TikTok, and it has been our fastest growing platform. I tried to pull, I'm trying to think what the numbers were. I don't know. I have to look at where they are, today, because they kind of unfortunately grow on a daily basis. I think we're up to like maybe 650,000 TikTok followers. Yeah. So it's like anything, reaching people where they live, right? And we'll have to make sure that we're on that platform, and whatever the next one is, and the next one that sort of comes up and grows. And then I think it's the fact that it really does resonate. Like that generation cares. I
Yeah.
mean, and they don't want to have single-use plastic, and they are concerned about the environment, and there are like all of those things as well. And
Mhm.
we're finding that generation doesn't drink as much. So it's
Yeah.
been an interesting shift from that perspective too, because a lot more of of drinking age or not, like that sort of
Right.
generation doesn't, that alcohol consumption has gone down.
Mhm.
So people are looking for an alternative and something fun, and that they can, be at a party and drink a liquid death and
Yeah.
not feel like, oh, I feel bad because I'm having a water and I'm not having a
Yeah.
beer. So those are, we'll continue to do it that way. And then as for us, like we always use the term cans in hands, right? Like
Yeah.
we know that when someone holds our product and looks at it and checks it out, that they have a really
Mhm.
good time and they'll share it and show it and all of that. So we'll continue to, get cans in hands
Yeah.
um, as we go forward for that generation too.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, everything you've mentioned is just, so positive. And I love, liquid death, but in the back to the beginning, rainbows and butterflies, right? So I'd love to, on that vein, I'd love to talk a little bit about your leadership style. As chief business officer, what would you say is the most important role of that position at not only Liquid Death, but, across companies?
Yeah. I mean, I think about it as empowerment. Like my job across the company is to make our business grow faster and smarter. Right. And like, how do we go? And particularly in something like this, I mean, it might be slightly different depending on the size company you're in or what the goals
Mhm.
are or whatever. But like, we are an upstart, CPG beverage brand. Right. And so
Yeah.
it's like, our goal is to get as big as fast as we possibly can. And so my job is to move the obstacles to do that, to empower the teams to be able to go get done what they need to get done. Like we've
Mhm.
hired great, smart people who know their business. And so it's like, how do we remove the roadblocks so they can go do that? It's about learning issues quickly, right? If they're
Yeah.
problems, right? So we can address them very quickly and be able to move on. And then I think about it for me, or like in the business, the BD side, at least, is opening up new channels.
Yeah.
So, well, we know we're doing direct to consumer and Amazon and, retail, and we know what we have to do there. How do we then open new channels? So the Live Nation partnership, other venues, stadiums. I'm thinking a lot right now about like, sets, like let's get rid of single use plastic on movie sets. Right. And
Mhm.
how do we create a movement around that? Whatever those different venues and channels and avenues. So it's like, okay, what's the next wave? How do we then start doing those deals and then empower people to go get that stuff done? So
Yeah.
that's how I think about it. Yeah.
I love that. And on that, on that note, is there any like, mentors you've had in your past as you reflect on your career and some of the best advice you've gotten, or, some of the advice that you would give to some companies who are looking to get more in the mix of what's trending now and kind of being edgy like a company like Liquid Death?
Yeah. I mean, from an advice perspective, I mean, and definitely have gotten, I think the two, like, depends on where people are in their career. I think like early in career advice of like, you know, like, like come with solutions. Like you may have a problem, but like come with a solution and be
Yeah.
proactive. How do you make your boss like look good? How do you make people, come in to solve things, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then middle across the whole way, it's sort of the idea that I love. Someone said to me once, like, you get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to be.
Hmm.
And then as you get up or, start, like, I think about my job a lot and was having a conversation with someone where we were saying like, oh, you have your to-do list every day and you're like trying to get stuff done, but like all these fires keep coming up that take you off course. And then at some point realizing like, that is your job. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
the fires
Welcome.
is actually your job, right? And you have
Yeah.
to just figure out how to incorporate it in,
Yeah.
Um, and then if I'd say for like people who are looking and figuring out what to do for their brand, it goes back to like to core values, right? Like, what are you about? Like, our goal is to make like drinking water one of the healthiest things you can do, and
Hmm.
making it as fun as like scary movies and stand-up comedy, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the goal, while using less plastic, like that's
Yeah.
what we're trying to do. And if you approach everything from that same place, I think sometimes it gets hard when you want to do collaborations or you want to work with other great brands where you think, oh, well,
Right.
like this brand's great and this brand's great. So like, we got to be able to do something. And then it ultimately comes down to like, what are those core values? Like, what's the idea? What's the thing that people are really going to talk about versus just, here are two big companies doing something. It's like, what's the execution and how do you show up are the things that really, if you start from that, then the rest of it will sort of fall out from there.
Absolutely. Well, I love everything you said about, getting comfortable in the uncomfortable. I think everyone could relate to that in their own way. I know in my career, every time I felt friction or nerves to do something, that's when I knew I should do it. Right. And I think, for you as like, the leader from a business perspective, how do you stay balanced? Right. I mean, your goal is to come in and create an environment for empowerment, but how are you making sure that in both kind of the business world and your personal life, you're maintaining balance and keeping wellness to really represent that to the company?
Yeah. I mean, it's not easy. You know what I mean? I have two kids, I have two girls and family and balancing with work. And like, I think it's like, it's also of thinking of that in the way you think of balance. Like I remember getting this advice of like, don't think of balance as like in a single day, like think about it in a month's time, and in that month's time, did you get done what you need to? Did you see friends? Did you spend time with family? Did you exercise? Did you do all the things that like, and you're going to have streaks and times that are going to feel kind of maybe more one way than the other. But that's, if you kind of take a step back and think about like balance in that way, then that allows you to sort of, show up as your best self. And, the reality is, unless you're doing that, if you're just burning out and burning through, like, yes, you have to move with speed and you have to do all those things, but like, if you don't keep that balance, then, you're going to burn out and it's not going to be fun. And if it's not fun, then there's just no point.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, I appreciate Amy. This was an amazing conversation and so interesting. I think, for the entire audience, it was wonderful to learn about what a company like Liquid Death is doing, both from a really interesting marketing perspective and for, sustainability and hoping to make the world a better place as well. So really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. It's great talking to you. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Amy. That was wonderful. Leigh, you did a great job. What a fun brand. That video was absolutely insane. I could only imagine how much fun it must be to be in the creative rooms when you guys are coming up with this stuff. Is it sort of a group think where you guys are like, oh, but what about this? And what about this? Is that kind of how it comes together?
There's definitely some riffing that goes off of things for sure. And I say it and say it again, like Mike Cesario, who's our CEO. When I was coming in, people like, he's the best creative mind. And you're like, okay. And you're like, oh no, yeah, he is. That's true. He's brilliant. And then we have great people on the teams. We work with great agencies.